The Great Hall of Nexer Prime was filled with thousands of beings from across the galaxy. Giant screens floated in the air, showing the faces of council members from 100 different worlds. The ceiling stretched so high that clouds formed near the top. This was the heart of the Galactic Union, where the most powerful species in the universe made their decisions. Kong Taeho stood alone in the center of the hall. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He wore the simple black uniform of a human ambassador. Around him, creatures of every shape and size watched from their seats. Some had scales, some had fur, some had no solid form at all. But they all shared one thing in common. They were looking at him with cold eyes. High Counselor Velith rose from his throne. He was a Cathori, a species known for their blue skin and for arms. His voice echoed through the hall like thunder. "Human Ambassador Kong Taeho, you stand before this council to hear our judgment." Taeho said nothing. He simply stood with his hands folded in front of him. 300 years ago, we allowed your species to join the Galactic Union, Velith continued. We gave you a chance to prove yourselves. We gave you access to our technology, our trade routes, our knowledge. And how do you repay us? A massive screen appeared in the air. It showed images of a burning planet. Ships with human markings flew through the smoke, dropping supplies and rescuing survivors. The planet Varus IV, Velith said. A dying colony. The council voted to let nature take its course. The cost of saving them was too high. The risk was too great. But your people ignored our decision. Your volunteers flew into danger without permission. They saved 12,000 lives against our direct orders. Spread through the hall. Commander Draxus, a massive warrior with red scales, laughed loudly. Typical humans. They cannot follow simple rules. Merchant Lord Quillen, a thin creature with silver skin and too many eyes, shook his head. Emotional creatures. They act on feelings instead of logic. Velith raised his hand for silence. The council has made its decision. For the crime of violating the non-interference protocol, humanity is hereby banished from the Galactic Union. You have 90 days to remove all humans from Union space. After that, any human found within our borders will be arrested. The hall erupted in noise. Some species cheered. Others simply nodded in approval. A few remained silent, but none spoke in defense of the humans. Taeho waited for the noise to die down. Then he stepped forward and bowed deeply. When he spoke, his voice was calm and clear. We understand. We will leave. The hall fell silent. Velith blinked his 4 eyes in confusion. That is all you have to say? What would you have me say? Taeho asked. You have made your decision. We will respect it. Commander Draxus stood up from his seat. No begging? No threats? I always knew humans were cowards. Taeho looked at him without anger. We are not cowards, Commander. We simply know when we are not wanted. Merchant Lord Quillen waved a thin hand dismissively. Good, the sooner you leave, the better. Your kind has always been a burden on our resources. Taeho bowed once more. We thank the Council for the 300 years we were allowed to serve. We wish you all prosperity in the future. Then he turned and walked out of the Great Hall. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. That night, Taeho gathered the human leadership in a small room on the station. The room was plain and simple, with white walls and a single window showing the stars outside. 4 people sat around a metal table. Yoon Hannah was the first to speak. She was a woman in her 50s with short black hair and oil stains on her hands. She had spent 30 years keeping the Union stations running. They really did it. They actually banished us. Park Jun slammed his fist on the table. He was a soldier, broad and strong, with scars on his face from battles fought in the Union's name. We saved 12,000 lives. 12,000. And this is how they thank us. Lee Sua shook her head slowly. She was older than the others, with white hair and gentle eyes. She had fed 60 colonies with her agricultural programs. I am not surprised. They have never seen us as equals. Dr. Choi Hyun, a thin man with glasses and kind hands, spoke quietly. What do we do now? Everyone looked at Tejo. He stood by the window, staring out at the stars. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he turned to face them. We leave, he said simply. June stood up angrily. Just like that? We built half of what they have. We can show them what happens when we are gone. We can make them regret this. Tejo shook his head. No, we will not become what they think we are. They call us emotional and dangerous. If we destroy what we built, we prove them right. Then what? Hannah asked. We just walk away and let them win? They have not won anything, Tejo said. They just do not know it yet. He sat down at the table and looked at each of them. We will leave with dignity. We will finish our work, train our replacements, and say our goodbyes. We will not sabotage, we will not protest, and we will not beg. We will simply go. Hua nodded slowly. And then we build something new, Tejo said. Something better. Something that is truly ours. The room was quiet for a long time. Outside the window, ships flew past, carrying beings who had just celebrated humanity's banishment. They did not know that they had made the greatest mistake in galactic history. Finally, Hione spoke. They will miss us when we are gone. Tejo smiled sadly. Yes, they will. But by then, it will be too late. One by one, the others nodded. They understood. They would leave silently. But their absence would speak louder than any words ever could. The countdown to humanity's departure had begun. The news spread across the galaxy like fire. Humans were leaving. After 300 years, they were finally going away. Most species celebrated. They threw parties and made jokes about the weak little creatures who could not follow rules. But in the quiet corners of the Union, something else was happening. Something no one expected. The humans were saying goodbye. Yoon. Hannah walked through the long hallways of Station Kethral 7. The walls hummed with the sound of machines. Pipes carried air and water to every corner of the massive structure. Lights flickered in patterns that only she understood. She had worked here for 30 years. She knew every wire, every valve, every secret of this old station. A young Cathori engineer walked beside her. His name was Torak, and he had been assigned to take over her job. He held a tablet in his 4 hands, trying to take notes on everything she said. The main oxygen system needs adjustment every 12 hours, Hannah explained. Not 11. Not 13. Exactly 12. If you miss the window, the filters start to fail. Torak nodded quickly. Yes, yes. I understand. Hannah stopped and looked at him. Do you? Because this station holds 2 million lives. If the air stops flowing, they all die. Torak swallowed nervously. I will remember. Hannah handed him a thick book filled with handwritten notes. This is everything I know about this station. Things that are not in any computer. Things I learned by watching and listening for 30 years. She paused. Take care of them, Torak. She walked away without looking back. Torak stood alone in the hallway, suddenly aware of how quiet it was, how empty it would soon become. On the border of Union space, Commander Park Jun gathered his soldiers for the last time. The Human Volunteer Corps had served on 17 outposts in the most dangerous regions of the galaxy. They fought pirates. They rescued stranded ships. They answered distress calls that no one else would answer. Jun stood before his troops in the cold cargo bay of their ship. They wore simple uniforms, patched and worn from years of service. Many had scars. Some were missing limbs. All of them had risked their lives for species who now wanted them gone. I know you are angry, Jun said. I am angry too. We gave everything to the Union. We bled for them. We died for them. And they threw us away like garbage. The soldiers murmured in agreement. But we will not become monsters, Jun continued. We will not prove them right. We will leave these posts in perfect condition. We will hand over our weapons and our ships. We will salute our replacements and wish them luck. He paused. Because that is who we are. That is what makes us human. One young soldier raised her hand. Sir, what about the colonies we protect? Without us, the pirates will attack them. Jun's jaw tightened. I know, but it is no longer our responsibility. We tried to help. We were told we are not welcome. He looked at each of his soldiers. Remember this feeling. Remember what it means to be thrown away. And when we build our new home, we will never make anyone feel this way. The soldiers saluted. One by one, they began packing their things. On the agricultural world of Primus 6, Lee Sua walked through fields of golden grain. The wind moved through the crops like waves on an ocean. She had created these plants herself. They could grow in any soil, survive any weather, feed billions of hungry mouths. A group of alien farmers followed her, trying to learn everything she knew. But farming was not just about knowledge. It was about patience. It was about love. It was about waking up before sunrise and working until your back ached. The seeds need to be planted at exactly this depth, Sua said, kneeling in the dirt. Too deep, and they will not grow. Too shallow, and the birds will eat them. One farmer, a tall creature with green skin, looked frustrated. This is too complicated. Can we not use machines? Sua smiled sadly. You can try, but the machines do not know when the soil is tired. They do not know when the rain is coming. They do not know how to listen to the land. She stood up and brushed the dirt from her knees. I am leaving you everything I have. 40 years of work. 60 colonies depend on these crops. Please take care of them. The farmers nodded, but their eyes were distant. They were already thinking about easier ways, faster ways. They did not understand that some things could not be rushed. At Union Central Hospital, Dr. Choi Hayan saw his last patient. She was a small creature with purple fur and big sad eyes. Her species was rare, and most doctors refused to treat them. The medicine was too complicated. The risk was too high, but Hayan had never refused anyone. The treatment is finished, he said gently. You will need to take this medicine every day for 1 month. Then you will be healthy again. The creature looked up at him with tears in her eyes. Why are you leaving? You are the only doctor who would help me. Hugh knelt down beside her. I have to go, but I have trained other doctors. They will take care of you. They do not care like you do, she whispered. Hyun had no answer for that. He simply hugged her and walked away. His waiting room was full of patients he would never see again. Creatures from 100 worlds, all crying, all begging him to stay, but he could not stay. None of them could. On the last day of the 90-day deadline, Ambassador Kong Taeho stood at the main docking port of Nexer Prime. Behind him, the last human ships were preparing to leave. Thousands of humans walked past him in silence, carrying their belongings. Heading into the unknown, High Counselor Velith came to watch them go. He expected to see anger on their faces. He expected protests and shouting. Instead, he saw something that confused him. He saw peace. Taeho turned to face him. It is done. All humans have left Union space. Velith nodded. Good. I hope you find whatever you are looking for out there. Oh? Taeho smiled. We already have, Counselor. We have each other. He walked onto the last ship. The doors closed behind him. The engines roared to life, and just like that, humanity was gone. Velith watched the ship disappear into the stars. He felt a strange feeling in his chest. It was not happiness. It was not relief. It was something he could not name. He shook his head and walked back to the council chamber. There was work to do. Important work. The Union would be stronger without the humans. He was sure of it. 6 months passed since the humans left. At first, nothing seemed wrong. The councils celebrated their pure union. They made speeches about how much better things were, without the emotional creatures causing problems. But slowly, quietly, cracks began to appear. It started on station KETHRAL-7, TORAK. The young Cathori engineer ran through the hallways in a panic. Alarms screamed from every speaker. Red lights flashed on the walls. The oxygen levels were dropping, and he did not know why. Check the manual, his supervisor shouted through the communicator. What does it say? Torak flipped through Yunhana's handwritten book with shaking hands. It says to adjust the filters every 12 hours. I did that. I did everything it said. Then why is the system failing? Torak did not have an answer. The book told him what to do, but it did not tell him why. It did not explain the sounds the pipes made when something was wrong. It did not describe the smell of burning circuits before they failed. These were things Hannah had learned over 30 years. Things that could not be written down. 3 hours later, the station's oxygen dropped to dangerous levels. 200,000 people had to be evacuated to emergency shelters. 47 died before help arrived. Torak sat alone in the control room, holding the book Hannah had given him, crying. The border regions were even worse. Without the human volunteer corps, the outposts stood empty. Pirates quickly learned that no one was coming to stop them. They attacked colony ships in broad daylight. They raided supply convoys without fear. Distress calls went unanswered because the new patrol ships decided the risk was too high in one terrible week. 3 colony ships were destroyed. 15,000 people died screaming into their radios, begging for help that never came. Commander Draxus was called before the council to explain. He stood tall and proud, refusing to show weakness. We cannot be everywhere at once, he said. These attacks happen in dangerous areas. It is not our fault that people travel through unsafe regions. Councillor Velith frowned. The humans used to protect these routes. Why can your soldiers not do the same? Draxus hesitated. The humans were reckless. They took unnecessary risks. My soldiers follow proper protocol. Your protocol let 15,000 people die, someone shouted from the crowd. Draxus said nothing. For the first time, he had no clever response. On Primus 6. The crops were dying. The alien farmers had tried to follow Lisua's instructions. They planted the seeds at the right depth. They watered them at the right time. But the plants still withered and turned brown. This makes no sense, one farmer complained. We did everything the human said, another farmer kicked at the dry soil. These stupid plants are too complicated. We should grow something easier. They did not understand that the soil was exhausted. They did not know that the nutrients were gone. Sua would have known. She would have felt it in the dirt between her fingers. She would have smelled it in the air. But they did not have her gift. They only had her instructions. By the end of the season, the harvest was half of what it should have been. 60 colonies that depended on Primus 6 began to ration food. People who had eaten 3 meals a day now ate 2. Children went to bed hungry. And it was only the beginning. Union Central Hospital became a place of despair. Dr. Choi Yun had trained other doctors before he left. He had given them his notes, his techniques, his years of experience. But he could not give them his heart. The new doctors looked at complicated patients and shook their heads. Too risky, they said. The chance of success is too low. They followed rules and protocols. They protected themselves from failure. And people died because of it. One mother brought her sick child to the hospital. The child had a rare disease that affected only mixed-species families. It was complicated and dangerous to treat. Hyun would have tried anyway. He always tried. The new doctor looked at the child and sighed. I am sorry. There is nothing we can do. The mother fell to her knees. Please, I am begging you. There must be something. The risk is too high, the doctor said. We could make it worse. Dr. Hayan would have helped us, the mother cried. He never refused anyone. The doctor's face hardened. Dr. Hyun is gone. The humans are gone. This is how things are now. The mother carried her dying child out of the hospital. She walked past waiting rooms filled with patients who had nowhere else to go. Patients who remembered a time when a kind man with glasses would see them no matter what. The trade networks collapsed next. Merchant, Lord Quillen, had always seen humans as annoying middlemen. They stuck their noses into every deal, making sure everyone was treated fairly. They smoothed over arguments between species who hated each other. They found solutions that made everyone a little happy. Without them, old grudges came back to the surface. The Cathori refused to trade with the Vorians because of a war that happened 500 years ago. The Vorians blocked shipments to the Cathori in revenge. Other species picked sides. Trade routes that had been open for centuries suddenly closed. Quillen watched his profits disappear. Prices went up. Goods became scarce. Economies that had been stable for generations began to crumble. He called an emergency meeting with the other merchants. "We need to find new mediators," he said. "Someone to help us negotiate." "Who?" one merchant asked. "The only ones who would talk to everyone were the humans. The rest of us have too much history." Quillen had no answer. High Counselor Velith received reports every day. Each one was worse than the last. Stations failing. Colonies starving. Ships burning. Trade collapsing. The Union was falling apart. No one could explain why. He stood alone in his private chamber, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the humans were building their new home. They were probably struggling in some empty corner of space, barely surviving at least. That was what he told himself. But late at night, when he could not sleep, a terrible thought crept into his mind. What if they were not struggling? What if they were thriving? What if everything falling apart in the Union was not a coincidence? He pushed the thought away. It was impossible. The humans were weak and emotional. They could not survive without the Union, could they? The cracks were growing wider, and Velith was running out of ways to ignore them. 1 year after the banishment, the Galactic Union was dying. High Counselor Velith stood before an empty council chamber. Half of the seats were vacant. Some species had stopped coming to meetings. Others had left the Union entirely. The great hall that once held thousands now echoed with silence. The numbers were devastating. The economy had fallen by 40%. 12 colonies had declared independence, tired of waiting for help that never came. Civil unrest spread across 100 worlds. People were angry. People were hungry. People were afraid. Velith ordered a full investigation. He wanted answers. He wanted someone to blame. What he got instead was the truth. The investigators worked for 3 months. They examined every system, every record, every corner of the Union. When they finished, they presented their findings to what remained of the council. The problem, the lead investigator said, is not any single failure. It is the absence of humans. Commander Draxus laughed bitterly. Impossible. The humans held no positions of power. They were just workers. Exactly, the investigator replied. They were everywhere. They were the ones who kept everything running. The screen behind him lit up with data. Charts and graphs and numbers filled the air. Humans made up only 3% of the Union population, the investigator continued, but they performed 27% of all maintenance work. They filled 40% of all dangerous jobs. They volunteered for 60% of all rescue missions. The numbers kept coming. Humans had developed 70% of the agricultural innovations feeding Union colonies. They had created 80% of the medical techniques used in cross-species treatment. They had served as mediators in 90% of all trade negotiations between hostile species. They never asked for recognition, the investigator said. They never demanded higher positions. They simply worked. They helped. They cared. Merchant Lord Quillen's silver skin had turned pale. Why? Why would they do all of this for nothing? Because that is who they are, the investigator said quietly. They helped because they saw people in need, not because it benefited them. Not because they wanted power, simply because they could. The chamber fell silent. For the first time, the council members began to understand what they had lost. Velith spoke slowly. We called them emotional. We said it was a weakness. It was not weakness, the investigator said. It was empathy. They felt the pain of others as their own. That is why they could not ignore a dying colony. That is why they answered every distress call. That is why they treated patients no one else would touch. Recording appeared on the screen. It was Ambassador Kong Taeho, speaking to the human leadership on the night of the banishment. They do not value us, Taeho said in the recording. Perhaps they never will. But we will not become bitter. We will not destroy what we built. We will leave with our dignity intact, and we will build something new. Something that does not require us to beg for respect. Velith watched his own reflection in the screen. He remembered standing in the great hall, expecting the humans to scream and fight. Instead, they had bowed and walked away. He had thought they were weak. He had been wrong. Could have destroyed us, he whispered. They knew every system. Every weakness. They could have sabotaged everything before they left. The investigator nodded. Yes. They could have poisoned the crops. They could have crashed the stations. They could have deleted every piece of data they had collected over 3 centuries. Instead, they left instruction manuals. They trained replacements. They made sure we had a chance to survive without them. Why? Draxus asked. His voice was no longer proud. It was broken. Why would they help us after what we did to them? Because they are human, the investigator said. Revenge would have proven you right about them. They chose to prove you wrong instead. Velith buried his face in his hands. He had ruled the council for 50 years. He had made countless decisions. He had always believed he was wise. Now he saw the truth. He had thrown away the most valuable species in the galaxy because he was too blind to see their worth. What do we do now? Someone asked. No one had an answer. That night, Velith sat alone in his private chamber. The stars outside his windows seemed dimmer than before. Or maybe that was just his imagination. He played Tejo's recording again and again. He watched the human ambassadors speak with calm dignity. He watched Yoon Hana, Park Jun, Lee Sua, and Choi Hain nod in agreement. These people had given everything to the Union, and the Union had spit in their faces. Velith thought about all the times he had ignored humans. All the times he had dismissed their concerns. All the times he had laughed at their emotions. He had been so sure that strength meant power, that wisdom meant coldness, that caring was weakness. He had been so sure, and he had been so wrong. Tears rolled down his blue face. He did not understand why he was crying. He had never cried before. Perhaps it was something he had learned from watching the humans. Perhaps some of their humanity had rubbed off on him after all. He made a decision. He would find the humans. He would apologize. He would beg them to return. It was the only way to save the Union. But deep in his heart, he knew it would not be enough. You could not throw people away and then ask them to come back when you needed them. Some wounds did not heal. Some bridges could not be rebuilt. Still, he had to try. He owed them that much. He owed them everything. The next morning, Velith announced his plan to the council. He would lead a delegation into unexplored space. He would search for the humans. He would bring them an offer of peace. Some council members laughed. Others shook their heads. But no one tried to stop him. They were out of options. They were out of hope. The only chance they had left was the species they had thrown away. Velith boarded his ship and set course for the unknown. Behind him, the Galactic Union continued to crumble. Ahead of him lay nothing but darkness and stars. Somewhere in that darkness, the humans were waiting. The question was whether they would listen, and whether listening would be enough. 5 years had passed since the banishment. 5 years of searching. 5 years of watching the Union fall apart behind him. High Counselor Velith had grown old. His blue skin had faded to gray. His forearms moved slowly now, but he refused to give up. His ship traveled through regions of space that no Union vessel had ever explored. They passed dead planets and dying stars. They crossed empty voids where nothing lived. Many times his crew begged him to turn back. Many times he refused. Then, on a cold morning in the 5th year, they found something. A signal. A faint beacon pulsing in the darkness. Velith ordered his ship to follow it. What they found took his breath away. It was not a small colony struggling to survive. It was not a group of refugees hiding from the galaxy. It was a civilization. Dozens of planets orbited healthy stars. Space stations dotted the void like diamonds. Ships of every size flew between worlds in perfect order. And everywhere, there was life. Velith's ship was greeted by a welcoming committee. To his shock, it was not just humans. He saw species he recognized, species the Union had abandoned over the centuries. Refugees, exiles, the forgotten ones. They were all here, living together in peace. A human shuttle docked with his ship. The door opened, and Ambassador Kong Taeho stepped through. He was older now, with white hair and wrinkles around his eyes. But he stood straight and tall, and his voice was as calm as ever. "Hi, Counselor Velith," Taeho said. "We have been expecting you." Velith could not speak. He fell to his knees on the cold metal floor. His old bones ached, but he did not care. He had found them. After 5 years, he had finally found them. "Please," he whispered. "Please come back. We were wrong. We need you." Taeho looked down at him with an expression Velith could not read. It was not anger. It was not hatred. It was something softer. Something sadder. "Stand up, Counselor," Taeho said gently. "We do not make people kneel here." He helped Velith to his feet and led him to a viewing window. Below them, a beautiful planet turned slowly in space. Green forests covered the land. Blue oceans sparkled in the sunlight. Cities of white and gold rose from the surface like dreams made real. "This is New Earth," Taeho said. "Our home. The home of the Human Federation." Velith stared in disbelief. "You built all of this in 5 years?" Taeho smiled. "We have always known how to build. You simply never let us." He led Velith on a tour of the Federation. They visited hospitals where every patient was treated, no matter how complicated their case. They walked through farms where crops grew in abundance, enough to feed everyone with plenty left over. They watched as ships launched to answer distress calls from the farthest reaches of space at every stop. Velith saw the same thing, humans working side by side with other species. No one was turned away. No one was considered lesser. Everyone had value. Yoon Hannah ran the engineering division now. Her stations never failed. Park Jun commanded a fleet that protected the weak and answered every call for help. Lee Sua had developed new crops that could grow on any world. Dr. Choi Hen had trained the generation of doctors who believed that every life was worth saving. They had taken everything they learned in the Union and made it better. Finally, Taeho brought Velith to a quiet garden overlooking the capital city. They sat on a wooden bench surrounded by flowers that bloomed in every color. "You want us to return to the Union?" Taeho said. It was not a question. Velith nodded desperately. "Yes, please. We are falling apart without you. People are dying. Worlds are starving. Everything is collapsing." Taeho was quiet for a long moment. "We forgave you long ago, Counselor. We do not hold anger in our hearts. Then you will come back." Taeho shook his head slowly. "No. We will not return to a place where we must beg for respect. We will not go back to being servants in someone else's house." Velith's heart sank. Then all of this was for nothing. "I came all this way for nothing." "It's not for nothing," Taeho said. "We will not return. But we have another offer." Oh. He turned to face Velith directly. "Join us. You and anyone else who wants to come. Join the Human Federation as equals. That is the only offer we will make." Velith blinked in confusion. "Join you? After everything we did?" "We do not punish people for the mistakes of the past," Taeho said. "We only ask that you learn from them. Here, no one is lesser. No one is thrown away. If you can accept that, you are welcome." Velith looked out at the city below. He saw children playing in the streets, children of different species laughing together. He saw old enemies sharing meals. He saw a world where empathy was not weakness, but strength. He whispered, "How did you do all of this? How did you build paradise from nothing?" Taeho smiled gently. "We did not build paradise. We built a home. A place where everyone matters. A place where being kind is more important than being powerful. That is all." Velith stayed in the garden for a long time after Taeho left. He watched the sun set over New Earth. He watched the stars come out one by one. He thought about everything he had believed his whole life. He thought about power and strength and logic. And he realized that none of it mattered as much as he had thought. When he returned to his ship, he sent a message to the dying Union. He told them what he had found. He told them about the Human Federation and its offer. He told them that anyone who wanted a better life could come. Millions answered the call. Species that had stayed loyal to the Union packed their ships and flew into the unknown. They were tired of watching their worlds fall apart. They were tired of waiting for help that never came. They wanted to live in a place where people cared about each other. The Union continued to shrink. Some species were too proud to leave. They stayed behind, clinging to their empty power, ruling over ruins. Commander Draxus was one of them. He died alone, still insisting that strength was all that mattered. But most chose to leave. Most chose hope. Over the following decades, the Human Federation grew into the greatest civilization the galaxy had ever known. Not through war, not through conquest. Through compassion, Ambassador Kang Taho lived long enough to see his dream become reality. On his last day, he sat in the same garden where he had spoken with Velith so many years ago. His old friends surrounded him, Hannah, June, Sua, and Hyen, all gray-haired and peaceful. Was it worth it? Hannah asked him. All those years of being treated like nothing? Taho smiled and closed his eyes. Every moment. Because we proved something important. We proved that kindness is not weakness. We proved that the quiet ones can change the universe. We proved that those who are silently dismissed will be loudly missed. He took his last breath as the sun rose over New Earth. The people mourned him as a hero. But more than that, they remembered him as a good man. And in the end, that was all he ever wanted to be. The story of humanity's banishment passed into legend. Children of every species learned about the quiet people who were thrown away and built something beautiful. They learned that true strength comes not from power, but from heart, and the lesson echoed through the ages. Those who are ignored today may become the light of tomorrow. And absence, sometimes, speaks louder than any words ever could.